Hello and welcome to C3 Part 2, Working with Compass Navigators, Simple Elements. We're going to create custom buttons, groups, and additional elements, images, etc. And we're going to create custom libraries out of those buttons and groups that we've created on our own here. So we're going to go ahead and flip right over to our Compass Navigator software. So you will see some rehash of information you've learned previously throughout this, and sometimes we will take some shortcuts here. For example, we've already created a new project here where we have added 4 IR controllable devices: a display, a satellite set-top box, Blu-ray player, and an Apple TV. And we're going to go ahead and work in our iPad here. And we're going to begin to create templates reflecting the system. And so we're going to want to create, first thing, is to create buttons for each of those devices we have that you can see in our System Designer tree. They're the display, satellite, Blu-ray player, and Apple TV. So of course we need to open up our button library and open up the default, because you do not have your own custom libraries yet. You will very soon. Okay, so the first order of action here, what we'd like to accomplish for our very first template we're building together as a GUI for a compass controller, is to create a button that's going to represent each of these devices that are in our simple system here: the display, the satellite box, the Blu-ray player, and the Apple TV. So there's 2 ways we could go about that. And the first way we're going to show you here is in our buttons library that is open. There are tabs for display and source button. And I'm going to go into the display button here, and I'm going to pull in, say, this button image that is called display plasma button 172 by 115. Those are the pixels. And we take a look and we see the shape is there, but there's really nothing we could see. So sometimes that happens, and we just increase the depth level because it was on the same depth level as the background image. And now we could see that just fine. And we could see the sub-elements there, our text up and image up and image down. And we're going to want to add some text to this guy. And we can now see, if we open up the tree on the Page Designer panel, we could see text up is included in that tree. And we're going to go ahead and make all the definition of that text up position here so that we could then add the text down if we'd like, and it will actually retain all of the properties from the text up. So first of all, by default, we do add the text to be the exact same dimensions, width and height, as the button itself. So typically it's going to be nice and centered. When you have an image on that button, maybe it doesn't work out so well, that location. So we could go ahead and adjust this and say make it 35. And now we're working with something a little more reasonable. So we could shift the Y positioning maybe down to 75, and that's even a little too low. So let's say 65 even. And in fact, just being a little nitpicky here, maybe 70 is the best position after all, and we'll go ahead and apply a nice white color to it when we're in this up state. Okay, and again, I'm nitpicky here because I'm just going to be doing this. I want to do this one time, and now if I go into this button and I'd like to add additional sub-elements, text sub-elements such as text down, we go ahead, we take a look at it, and it retains those settings that we put in the text up position. So now we could go ahead and make it a different color if you'd like. And now we have the text up and the text down. And we could actually take a quick look at this, how this looks in our emulator here. Program emulator, or just Control E, and we could press this button. We could see it up and down. There we go. Text up, text down. Okay, So let's go ahead and exit our emulator by either pressing Control E again or clicking somewhere in the tree. And obviously we don't want it to say text up. Instead we'd like it to say something like display. Without the typos, preferably. And I can copy this, and I could have done this originally and before adding the text down, and it would have kept that word property, the text property as well. But I wanted to show you the text up and text down. There we go. So now we have our own custom display button here that has an image, and it has the text in the up position, text in the down position. Now, again, as we discussed earlier and even showed you in the C3 Part 1, this is an example of a button that actually has the image contains that television. It is the image. It's just one image that is the button and the television, and so if we'd like to add an overstate to this kind of button, we're going to have to start from scratch. And so we'll go ahead and do that now. If you recall from C3 Part 1, we have this empty tab here where we have this source button. And this is, again, a button that I like to use a lot. So I'll use this for a few examples throughout the C3 course. And we have it here now. And how do we make a custom button? Okay, well, first of all, we have the button, but we're going to need to add an image to it. So to add an image to it, we can't really add that picture of the television to the button up properties or anything like that. So actually what you want to do is, in fact, open up your image library and drop the image into the desired location on top of that button, and then we're going to make a full group out of this. So I'm going to go ahead now and open up my groups and my images library so that we could go ahead and drop an image on top of this button and then create a group out of that so that our button itself is technically a group. So we now have our groups library open and also our images library open, and we're currently looking in our groups library, where you may recall that there is an empty group under the control panel. Okay, and so what I'm going to want to do with this is actually drag an empty group onto the screen and match the location and dimensions of the button that I'd really like to make a group out of. So how do you do that? Well, a good thing to do, always a great idea, is to be organized and to name your elements appropriately. So for example, we're going to make another display button. So display BTN, for example. And we could, and we should also put the dimensions in there, okay? Because that's going to be actually very useful and save you a lot of work back and forth trying to remember what the exact dimensions are here. And so we see that the XY is 341.86 when we look in our properties in the top right corner there. So let's take our empty button, our empty group rather, drag it to the approximate location we want it to be. And we will then size it and position it as desired. 341.86 was it? 341.86 is this button. So we could take a look at this empty panel here. 341.86, there we go. And width and height 173.115. Okay, so now we're going to drag the display button into that group and maybe even apply a good name to this group. For example, display button group 173 by 115. And things are moving a little slow because of my recording software here again. But it looks like it took all of that. Very good. And now we could open up this button here And basically what we're trying to do is make a clone of that other display button that we've just customized a moment ago. So remember that the text properties, you could set them in the up position, and then as you add the down and even the over, as we're going to do here, they'll basically clone the properties that we've defined in the up position. So let's go ahead and get rid of the text down and manipulate this text up, where I believe we had a height of, say, 30. And our X position was at 70, where our size was at 26. And it told us display. Okay. And now we should be able to go ahead and add that text down and that text over. And those settings are just carrying right through. And we're also going to add an image over. Okay. Now, before we get to that image over, let's go ahead and put the image of that display in here, making this custom group for our button here, just in case you happen to be working with a device that maybe we don't have a button already in our library for, that has the picture of the television and that sort of thing that you, or the device graphic that you might be looking to use. So here in the images library, we do have a tab here that is called, let's see, not source, but we want displays. There they are. And so we actually have the image in here, and I could either just move it on the iPad or in the tree so that it becomes part of that group. Okay, and now you can see where it falls in line within that group. We can't see it, again, probably just a depth issue. There we go. And we see that this guy has the graphic, this graphic has the width of 129, where our button is 173. So 173 minus 129 equals 44. Divide that by 2 equals 22. And now we know it's going to be nice and centered if we put it at 22 position on the x-axis. And maybe at, say, 10, the y-axis, so it doesn't encroach too much on the space of our text there. And now we had what? We had the case of the button over, where we don't have that graphic on this one yet. And we've seen this before where it's kind of just free floating there. And so if you recall, what we want to do here is add an image to this button over. So we're going to go ahead and browse, and it's going to pull open the folder I was in last, which is the resources folder in the C drive, program files, key digital, compass control, resources, and this is where we keep all of the images. And you guys probably remember the name of that was main button. Here we are, active 171 by 114. So now we select that button in there, and we could take a look at what it looks like in the up position. As you see it here, button down has a backlighting, and then button over gives us the full lighting internally, and looks like it's active, if you will, as I like to refer to it. So now we just need to manipulate our text here. I thought that was going to retain over for us. Let's see what the text over did. Okay, that carried over from the up position. So let's maybe do this. Delete. Okay, delete everything associated with that text. In fact, let's go in here now and deselect that sub-element of the button, and text down, deselect, and text down. We will reapply that, and let's see what happens now. Text down, There we go. Now it took it because it did previously have some properties in there, and hey, sometimes we got to show you what to do and what not to do. So now you can see, and say in that down position, you know me, I like to go with that sky blue font coloring, and now we could take a look at this graphic. We could go in emulate mode here, Control E, and see what happens. It's up, it goes down, it pops back up, right? Why don't we see the over position? Well, recall that when you're just pressing a button, it goes up, it goes down. What we have to do here is actually tell it to go into that over position when it's pressed down. So to do that, we go into our events and actions. We're going to add an event and action to the button. Mind you, we're on the button, not on the group itself. And we want to create a new event when we press this button down. There we go. And this is a GUI, set GUI GUI element property action here. And instead of identifying everything by going main page and choosing the page it's on, specifying the element, when you're within the element, you could simply select this element, and the value of this is just going to be toggled, TGL. That is what you must type. There is up, there is down, and there is TGL for toggle. Alright, so now let's return to our emulator mode here and play with these buttons. Press the button down, and it goes to the down temporarily, and then it becomes active. Pop it back up by pressing again. Where we could compare this to the button that we already had that did not have the active state, and it was just an image there. How does it look? It gives you that backlighting in the down position. Okay, I could press and hold to maybe give it kind of an active appearance as I hold, let go. Okay, but it's really not the same as having that active backlighting there. And you're going to see why that becomes important here with further exercises through the C3 course. So we could click into our tree to exit the emulator mode. And now we are going to want to save these buttons because it is nice practice and all, but we don't want to do the work over and over and over again through all of our projects. So we have one button and we have one group to save, don't we? And you can see here where we have the default library. I do also have my own custom buttons in there at this time. Now I'm able to actually just say, I'd like to create a new one. And we'll call this the C3 online. Okay, and it has no tabs, not yet anyways, but we press this icon here with the green plus, and we can call this My Buttons, or however you'd like to refer to it. And we can go ahead here and we can actually add this display plasma, which did have some customization to it, didn't it? It had the text that we added in there. And we can add to the library, and this is the library that we're currently in, so you got to make sure you're in the right place there. You could apply whatever name you'd like to call it, maybe something a little more generic that's you may have a way that you'd like to reference it while you're in the project. However, when you're pulling this in at later time, you might want to know it as something different, so we'll just leave this as is, but now you can see it is in there, and I'm going to save. Okay. Now for the group, I cannot add it to the button library because it's not a button. There is a button inside of the group, but lots of groups have buttons. In fact, lots of groups typically have lots of buttons. So we make you put it in that groups library, and it's going to be really the same process here. Where we go, we're going to go to the groups, we're going to create a new GUI library, and we'll call this C3 online. We will create a new tab. Called My Groups. And we will add this to our library. And again, we can name it whatever we'd like. In fact, I am going to change the name on this one because although there's only one display in this project, maybe you'd like to refer to this as a flat panel button group. There we go. And now we could see it in there. And we are able to save. Okay. And now what you can do, now that you have your own custom group created, and maybe as time goes on, you build a lot of nice graphics in there that you'd like to share with other Compass Control users, maybe within or maybe not even within your organization. What you're able to do is export this GUI library to a file. Okay. And if you export and then share with those Compass Control programmers like yourself, then you could, and they share a file with you, you could import using this button. So let's go ahead and export here. And it's going to ask you where you'd like to save it. Maybe in a Dropbox folder, something like that. Compass Libraries, I have my folder called as Graphics. And let's call this the C3 Online. And this is our groups. And similarly for my button library, I can export that if I wish. C3 online button. Okay. And you saw some of those various graphics, or some of those various libraries that were already in that folder. So let's see what we can import here. I'm in my buttons library right now, and I have JF buttons. I already have that one in my library, so it's not really going to let me take that. Groups. Here's a custom groups training that is not yet on this computer. So let's just jump into the groups. Again, just like I couldn't save a button in a groups library or save a groups in a button library, I cannot import a groups into a buttons library. Let's go ahead. Now I'm in my groups library, and currently I have what? I have default, JF custom, and C3 online. So let's go ahead and import the one that your friend, your fellow programmer shared with you. And they happen to call that one Custom Groups Training. And they are LDX extensions. And we can go on in, and now it is there. Okay, so that is how you are able to create and utilize your own custom libraries. Okay, and so let's continue now with our exercise where we wanted to create a button for every source, or every device rather, that is in this simple system. And so that is going to mean we're going to bid adieu to this button that did not have the overstate from our project. And we now have the display button. Okay, that is actually a group, as you recall. And we can actually do, we could just duplicate this a few times to add, to make additional groups. Okay, so we have the display button group. Let's call the second one, they're all in the exact same location, so we're not seeing them right now, but let's call our second one the sat button group, or satellite button group, not be lazy here. We'll call the third the Blu-ray button group. And we will call the fourth one the Apple TV button group. And you know, we could do some alignment options and that sort of thing. We know that these groups are 173 wide, so why don't we just take 200 off of each one. So right now I'm at 341 for the first one, and it's kind of a little more center than it is left. So let's start this guy at 50, shall we? And we'll take our second group and make that 250. And our third group will be located at 450. So you see I'm just adding 200 to each X coordinate because we know that they're 173 wide, so that gives an extra little space there as well. And finally, my fourth button, where it looks like it's all overlapping right now, doesn't it? It will become 650 and clean right up for us. So now we want to customize the text and the image on each of these buttons, or these groups, if you will. So let's open up the satellite button group, and we can expand the button itself. We could go to our text up. Currently says display. We know that it's going to want to say, we're going to want it to say satellite. So now we can click on it in the tree here, copy, and when we go to the text down, where it's a new button, it's not defined yet, paste, or just selecting and pressing Control V. Remember the text down, we also like to apply the color. Okay, and let's move over to our Blu-ray button group. We'll just handle all the text first. And text over. Finally, Apple TV. Very good. And now we could go into our images library and begin updating the images for these source buttons, satellite, Blu-ray, Apple TV. Okay, so our images library is open, and just as we previously used the image from the display button tab, we're going to jump into the source button tab here, where we have some image buttons. But then as we scroll down a little further, here we go, Apple TV. I see that first, so I'll just drag and drop that into the Apple TV group. And we could delete the display button, of course. And the Apple TV also looks like it's at 129 width, which means, if you recall, that our x-axis positioning can be 22, and the y-axis, we'd put the display at 10. Looks pretty good on the Apple TV as well. We'll go ahead and, I see here now a Blu-ray player. Take this, drag it on over into the group. That is the Blu-ray group. Remove the plasma button. position this at 22 on the x-axis, 10 on the y-axis. Looks good. And we'll find us a cable or satellite graphic. Here's a good one. Drag and drop into its respective group. Remove the image of the flat panel and position. There we go. Save our project here. We can, just for the fun of it, jump into emulator mode. There we go, and pop them all back up. And depending on how slow this recording looks, I'd imagine this video recording software, once again, is slowing down some of this process here. So these buttons, of course, don't take as long to turn over from the up down to the active position, or from the active to the down to the up position, conversely. And what do we want to do now? We want to add these to our library. So we could go ahead and exit that emulator mode by clicking in the tree. And all of these groups here, we could jump back into our groups library, and where we have the C3 online. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and add them to my own because I think these are pretty good groups to have. In fact, so I want to use them on my own projects going forward. So you could see I could jump into another group that's there already existing. Maybe it is one that, again, your colleague has shared with you. And we will go ahead and add the satellite group to the library. The Blu-ray group to the library. And the Apple TV group to the library. In fact, I'm also going to go ahead and add the display button group to the library as well. We could see it's refreshed here. We could take a look down at the bottom just to ensure that everything's there. There they are. And make sure you save your library. Okay. Now the next step of what we want to do, the second step of order of action here, is to create control panels for each of these devices. Okay, and we are going to take a bit of a shortcut by actually using 3 out of 4 will be pre-made groups that we have that we've already have available. And so we'll go into our default groups library. Okay, now that we have our groups library open, we're going to, again, import some control panels for each of these 4 devices. So in our default groups library, we go to the Control tab, and we have a number of control panels already made here that are kind of in the layout of a typical, say, handheld IR remote, if you will, something that is familiar to the user. We do have an empty group of note here. This is the same tab that we'd used before to have an empty group. And so I'm going to go ahead and begin to drop some of these control panels onto the page here. And we have them labeled appropriately. DVD player, these are some buttons that are typical of a DVD player, for example. Now, also very important to note about the naming. Well, just one moment here. Actually, we'll tell you first. When you drop a panel into the iOS controller, you're able to specify what device this is controlling. So we have all of our devices listed here in the that we've added to the project in this drop-down list here. So we're going to choose Blu-ray player, for example, for this one, and it gives us the option of choosing changing type. So if we change the device here, for example, we like to leave it as all devices in the same type. Maybe Blu-ray player 1 doesn't end up working out for this job. You remove that Blu-ray player that we're currently using from the project, you insert a new one. This control group there where it is associated with Blu-ray player 1 can now hop over to a different device in that same type by default. So Blu-ray player 1 is removed and Blu-ray player 2 is inserted in the project, and this should automatically carry over to control that Blu-ray player 2. Now, as I was saying, another very important part of the naming of these groups is this size. Again, I like to put that in the naming for everything. And these control panels, as you can see from looking at our groups library here, that I have adjusted the workspace. I pulled it up slightly so we could see a little bit more here. You can always adjust it to however you're comfortable. We use that size 306 by 324 very commonly here for these control groups. And so when it comes time to actually create our own control panel that we will actually do for the Apple TV, then we're going to want to use that same size as well, because again, we're creating control groups for each of these 4 devices, and we're going to make it so that in the C3 part 3 we're going to teach you the visibility toggle and the visibility listing tricks, if you will, visibility tricks. And so what we're actually going to do here, we're going to take the DVD player group. In fact, now's a good time to label it, give it the name we'd like to give it for that is specific to our project. Blu-ray control group, for example. And we will take our, let's see here, cable satellite we have. So how about this one here? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to now drag this cable satellite, and I'm going to drag it into the exact same location, which for the Blu-ray control group is 330 on the x-axis, 385 on the y-axis. And again, why I'm going to do this is really going to be something where we work with the visibility tricks in C3 part 3. So I'm going to take it and roughly drop it to the same place. This is for our satellite box. And where we had XY positioning 330 by 385 before, let's go ahead and apply those positioning properties to cable box, and we'll call this just as we had called it when we added the device. It was called satellite, so we'll call it satellite control group. And we will now add the, let's see, the display. Okay, so let's take a look for some display buttons. Here is display 1, so let's go ahead and drag that on over. And really these button groups aren't of the utmost importance, so if you don't see one in the display group that you like, for example, to control the display, it really doesn't matter right now. Okay, the X position 330, the Y position 385. Okay. And again, they're all 3 of them right on top of each other, right? They're fighting for that same space, if you will. And so what we're going to do here is actually jump into the properties of each of these groups. You could see their depth level, XY positioning, width, height, of course. And you could also see this visibility here. Is it visible by default or is it not? So now what I'm going to do is go in and start making these groups invisible by default, so that in our next set of exercises in C3 part 3 we can go ahead and reveal some of the tricks to making these groups visible so that you only see one at a time. And so the fourth group we're going to have here, we're going to create our own custom group again, just like we created our own custom button and then button group, if you will. We now have that empty group. Let's make sure that it is not part of that display group. It is, in fact, let's rename the display group quickly here. Display control group. Okay. And we will now rename the empty group, and this is going to be, as I mentioned earlier, Apple TV group that we're going to make. And I chose this one because it is well, a very limited amount of buttons that we'll do, so it won't take too long. Apple TV control group 306 by 324. So let's go ahead and apply our desired positioning and sizing properties. Oh, I did that backwards there, didn't I? There we are. Width, height 306 by 324, XY 330 and 385. And now we're going to go ahead and open up our buttons library so we could begin throwing some buttons into this control group. So now that our buttons library is open, we're going to go ahead and drag in the buttons that we'd like to use for an Apple TV remote, which again, one of the reasons we chose Apple TV as the control panel to build is because it's a very abbreviated amount of buttons on there. For example, we know that we have the navigational type buttons, and so here we have a very nice selection of directional arrows and the select button for the middle. And so I'm going to go ahead here and show you what not to do first, which is dragging this button right into the group. Now it is possible, it is not exactly not what not to do, but you could see when I do add this button, if I just put it on top of the group, it actually it is not within the group now. You could tell by the way it is branched in the tree, not within the Apple TV group. So I can drag and drop it in there, and now you'll be able to see that it is in fact indented, so that indicating it is part of the Apple TV group. So we're going to go ahead here and drag our directional keypad into the Apple TV group. Left arrow, and I'll just drag them all in first, before we start positioning them. Left, right, we have now. We'll throw the up and down in there as well. Okay. And we do have some groups that actually already feature these directional keypads in there, and so I've actually taken the time ahead of time here to kind of reference where they stand in position in relativity to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and apply these XY positions based on what I studied from one of our existing groups. Okay, and for those of you, I guess, who have been who are taking notes along with this, I will give you these XY coordinates. The left, for example, is going to be at 93x, 195y. The right was at 213x, 195y. The up is at 153x, 135y, and the down is at 153x, 255y. So the up, down, and even select fall in line horizontally at the x-axis, being 153 they share, where the left and right fall in line horizontally, so vertically in the x on the up, down, and center. Excuse me. They share y position 153, x position 153, and the left and right share the y position 195. So now we have this nice keypad here, and of course, if your space is of a premium, you could pull these in a little closer to the select circular button and have it look just fine as well. Now, what else goes into an Apple TV remote? Well, let's add some on-off buttons. And I know that I have an elongated on-off power button that is here in this black library. And maybe we need to clean up a few things here, but we do also have the silver buttons located in this black just for the on-off. Otherwise, we could go to that common, which is basically all of the buttons you see here in black as silver as the primary color. So let's go ahead and drag in our off and on buttons. We're going to apply XY positioning here for off at 13x and 60y. And our on button we will apply upper left hand positioning, by the way, as our reference. Our on button will apply at 204x and 60y. And we'll go ahead and adjust that off once more because I had the wrong reference. I had the center axis. Let's move it to the left. Apply this once more. 1360. And what else goes in? Once again, we have the menu button, which we know we have one in the common here. There we are, menu. So drag and drop it in the tree. So again, it automatically falls in line in the Apple TV group. And this will be at X position 13, Y position 226. There we are. And now the Apple TV also has a hybrid button that is play and pause. Okay, so it's a play pause toggle, if you will. And we do not have that button in our library, so instead we're going to use it as an opportunity to teach you a few tricks, which first of all would be taking an empty button and we're going to manipulate it to be our play pause. Looks like that did not go into the group as I had desired. Probably user error, of course. So let's give it a shot. There we are. Now it's back in here, and we'll give it a name. It will be play pause D8 by 60. And we're going to want to position this at 219, 226. So right now it's in the top left corner of our iPad because I initially did not drag it into the group. There we go. And if we look here, we say, well, it's black where the rest of them are silver, or white, if you will. And we know that the appearance of the button really is just a actual PNG image. So what we are going to do is actually invert these images. And you could do it one of two ways. I've showed you one already where we've opened up the Key Digital directory, gone into the resources folder, and actually pulled the image of the silver button for the up state and used the image of the black button in the down state, for example, is what we would do here. I'll show you one more trick that could actually maybe just offer a different approach, maybe even save a little time, just depending on your preference. And that is, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this play pause button. And I'm going to get an extra one here just temporarily. And it puts it again right on top of each other. So let's give it a different Y positioning, maybe 250, for example. And I'm sorry, 150 I meant to do. So now what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to take the down state of this new button, the clone button, and I'm going to copy that. And I want that silver to be in the up state of my actual button, don't I? So I'm going to go ahead here and say button up, and we will paste here. There we are, paste. And I'm going to now take the button up state of my original, which is the black, and I will copy. And again, this could also be achieved in the with Control C and Control V. And I'm going to take the button down state of my actual button I'd like to keep for this project and paste that black button image property in its place. There we go. Okay, and now we could go ahead and remove that play pause button, the extra one that is. And we could even, just for testing purposes, go ahead and Control E to emulate and just ensure that as I press this button, it does in fact go to the black position, very similar to how this prepackaged menu button does. There we go. So let's now exit our emulator mode by clicking in the tree and pressing pressing Control E. And we want to add some text to that custom button that we've done there. Okay. You can see now actually it says connect failed. Why? Because in emulator it does in fact send commands, as you guys well know by now. And so that menu button, since we've associated it with the Apple TV, it's actually if we had our MC2500 connected and whatnot, it would be executing IR command for the Apple TV, the menu button, out of IR port 4. So what else do we want to do here now? We're going to want to add text to this button. So we'll add our text up. We'll go ahead and select it in our tree, letting it know that we do in fact want to add that text up. And we could do something just as simple as a caret, if you will, play / pause. How can we do that? Maybe this key that looks like that shares the space with the backslash. And I've actually done this in a number of projects already and never had any complaints. I know it, maybe if you're as finicky about your graphics and whatnot as I am, maybe this isn't the 100% best look you'd like to have for this button. But actually, when you upload it on the iPad, it's very hard to notice any kind of difference between this text and the text of a button that we have already packaged, for example. Maybe we could see it looks like maybe a little bit not exactly centered vertically, so maybe we'll move this to a negative position to bump it up a few, maybe -2, for example. Let's see, what does that do for us? There we go, looks pretty well centered. And now we'll go ahead and add a text down position. And what do we want to do there is probably just adjust the color there slightly, where we can maybe even use that menu button as a reference How does it look when it is depressed? What color does the text move to? Is a whitish or light gray color. So we'll apply that same color to our text in the down position on our custom play pause button. There we go, a nice white color. This will be just fine. And now save our project. Anytime you invest time into creating custom items and that sort of thing, you certainly don't want to lose it. So it's always a good time to go ahead and update and save. And in fact, what we could also do now is add this button to our buttons library and add this group to our groups library as well.